we do what we do because we're programmed to do so. And sometimes we don't do what we want or should because we don't have the right programming yet.
So by definition, if they're smart, then I must be dumb. And so because they beat me.
Yes, because being smart is a zero-sum game.
So if it's like 99% of the time, is that really still, and only 1% wrong? Is that really dumb?
Oh, yeah. No, that's really dumb. It's cool. It's why I like listening to this podcast. I happen to be on it. I happen to be on it, but I just fill in my time because I have to and then listen to you guys.
Welcome to It's Not the Car. We're all doctors, and this is a podcast about fungal infections. We discuss various forms of athlete's foot and how they impact your body care habits. Has everyone left now?
Not.
Are you still there? No? Okay, or
the right thing.
Yes, we talk about racing, which is also kind of an infection of the feet, except it also involves the rest of your body and lasts your entire life, and there's no known cure. I'm Sam Smith. I'm a journalist and a club racer, and my favorite scene in Days of Thunder is that moment where Tom Cruise has to drive through the smoke and he's being yelled at by someone who sounds crazy, because really, most days that's just kind of a metaphor for life. I don't know. I haven't watched that movie in years. Maybe it stinks.
Mixed feelings, because there's
about athlete's foot. There's humor in athlete's foot.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I laugh about it all the time, every morning.
That makes total sense. I don't know, Jeff. Do you have athlete's foot? Do you laugh about it? I've never had it. Is it painful? We don't know.
Yep. Nope. No problems there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are
you guys going to say hi?
That would assume
talk about feet.
That we need to be athletes to have it.
Ooh, sexy. Yeah. Okay, say hi so we can get to the rest of the show, because I have things I want to say, and they're neat things, and it's all about me.
Okay, I'm Ross Bentley, and I've had athlete's foot, but I think I'm going to call it driver's foot. And honestly, I've had driver's foot. There's a thing there. I've created a look in the medical journals. Someday there's going to be a driver's foot. I've had it.
I'm going to make no jokes about this. Jeff, do you have any jokes for that?
Nope, no jokes. I'm Jeff Brown. I've never had driver's foot because I'm not a driver. I'm generally a motorhome driver, an airplane flyer back and forther from racetracks, and work on race cars.
All right. So we change formats on this show because we can do that. We're professionals and we know best, or something. Maybe we just know and it's not always right. Maybe it's never right. But today's format is related to that. Today's show format is something that we're calling Ross and Jeff Tell a Story. And the story, or rather the focus of the stories, plural, is the dumbest moments they've seen in racing, which is, it's not very complicated, right? Just imagine this as all of us sitting at a bar with drinks. Maybe we'll turn this into a series if folks like it. But the show is stories from each of them about stupid racing things they've been a part of or seen go down due to pressure and time, and how people come apart when they're really, really squeezed. Maybe this ends up being one story from each. Maybe it's multiple stories from each of them. I don't know. We haven't done it before. We don't know where it's going to go. The point is, even the pros make mistakes. Working under pressure takes people apart. And every time you screw up, you learn something, blah, blah, blah. Now I feel like Mr. Rogers. I think you know where this is going. The long story short is Ross and Jeff have been around professional motorsport, in and out of cars and paddocks and pits on almost every level, from the bottom of the top to the business, since before I was alive, literally. And they've seen a lot of doofuses. And sometimes those doofuses were, they were you, right, guys?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. When you said, Sam, okay, we're going to do dumb things we've seen in racing, I started thinking about that. And I started to think about, okay, what dumb things have I seen in racing, and how am I going to explain these? And then I realized that the dumb things I've seen in racing were all done by me.
Come on, really?
Yes. I started to think about, hey, I did like this race we had last weekend was at a 6-hour race at Watkins Glen. I did like 6 or 8 dumb things on the airplane flight back. I'm writing them down. I'm like, yeah, that was stupid. I shouldn't have done that. That was dumb. Why did I do that? Oh, I shouldn't have done that. That was stupid. So I think they only seem dumb after you get smarter, it seems like to me. So I've seen a lot of dumb things. I can explain some if you want me to, but of the dumb things I've done. And I'm not afraid to explain dumb things I've done because they've been obvious. But
Jeff, with that kind of attitude, you could be a journalist. I think you're well on your way to making very little money, having no job stability, and talking nonstop until people tell you, please shut up.
Shut up.
And on that note, I don't know, man. Okay, so start with something. So tell me the first thing that cracks into your mind when you think about dumb things you've done. Because with me, it's a waterfall. I have a fire hose of things in my head. What do you got?
I think I'll just pick one. Like I say, there's 150 of them. Is picking during a race, strategy-wise, what tires to be on. Rain tires or dry tires. Man, I get that wrong, I think, most of the time. And
really?
Yeah, and I have not found a good. Again, it's a little topical because Watkins Glen was that kind of a race. I got it right this weekend. I was like, holy, I didn't make a dumb mistake this weekend. But in the past, I've gotten that wrong. And it's never obvious. But it's obvious when you get it wrong, like really obvious. And so I don't know. That's one thing that's been a dumb mistake.
So, Jeff, don't you just leave that decision of which tires you want to be on, slicks or rain tires, up to the driver, and then they make the decision. And you go afterward. That was dumb.
That was yeah. I've tried to do that, but then the driver will be like, "Well, you didn't tell me it was going to rain harder."
Okay, well, hold on. Let's back up. So we're taping this a couple of days after IMSA's Watkins Glen weekend, right?
Yep.
And there was the way you described it earlier, it was like somebody flipped a switch and water just started pouring out of everywhere, up from the ground, from the sky, from the trees. Like what on the ground because the tire choice and the tire screw up is an interesting mistake to have because it's not you being dumb, right? But how does that feel dumb to you in the moment?
It feels, and I think a lot of these dumb moments don't seem dumb until circumstances change it, right? It's okay. So you think you're doing the right thing, and then suddenly you're like, oh man, that was really dumb. So in the rain tire choice, I got lucky. I'll say lucky, not smart, this weekend, and we did it right. We were always on the right tire. But when in the past, when I've been dumb about it, it becomes very obvious instantly when cars start to go streaming by you because they're on the correct tire and you're on the dumb choice tire. So that's when it becomes obvious. But there's no, and I've gone the other way. When I've got the right choice, I go, oh man, those guys were dumb. They should have gone to rain tires.
What's the old line about comparison being the theft of joy? Like but that's interesting, right? Because everybody, especially in racing, and especially if, you guys are actually good at this. And I've always felt like I don't know enough to make the right choices in a race car, in the paddock, no matter what I'm doing related to the sport, right? But the idea that you look around at what you're doing and you think, man, everybody else knows more than me and they're making the right call. And here you have something that is almost, there is no more an educated guess on this planet than to try and figure out what the weather's going to do, right? Which means that if you're going to be wrong about something, that's the place to be wrong because everybody's wrong about it all the time, even the people who do it for a living. So how do you sit there as a guy who does this every day? How do you beat yourself up for it? And I say that having beat myself up for much, much sillier things, right?
I think you beat yourself up for it because it became obvious that it was, quote, dumb.
So Jeff, though, one of the things that you've talked a lot about in the past is, a rule is anything that, if it happens more than 51% of the time, that's the way to go. Are you saying that more than 51% of the time you've gotten the tire choice call wrong?
No, probably I'm way better than that.
Okay.
But
so if it's like 99% of the time, is that really still, and only 1% wrong? Is that really dumb?
Oh yeah, no, that's really dumb.
Okay, well that tells us a lot about you.
That's really dumb because it's it just burns you like, oh man, it's not something that I don't know. It's not something that is obvious, but you should be able to get that right. Because I think maybe what it is it seems dumb because not everybody did the same thing as me. So somebody was smarter. So by definition, if they're smart, then I must be dumb. And so because they beat me.
Yes, because being smart is a zero-sum game.
In racing, I think it kind of is.
But okay. So let's say that. So let's call this in the pantheon of dumb mistakes. Let's call this you know the old line about the banality of evil. Let's call this the banality of dumb. So what's the other end of the spectrum? What's the big, sexy, dumb moment that Jeff has pulled off where you're like, oh God, that's it. I'm over. I'm going to go home and stick my head in the sand and never race again. Like, what's the exact opposite of picking the wrong tire?
Wow. I can think of one that's a little worse.
Okay. We'll start with that. Go.
Okay. So warm-ups. Most race series have a warm-up in the morning on Sunday, like an hour before the race. And a lot of guys would use it, okay, it's a session. We got to go out. We got to warm up. And it's usually at 8:00 in the morning, and the race is at noon, and the track's not at all like you're going to race on. And, there's a lot of traffic, and some guys are scrubbing tires. But in the past, everybody goes out. And I've gone out and wrecked the car or learned nothing, or worse, the drivers came in and said, well, it's handled like this, and I make a change for the race because we got to make the car better for the race. And then the track's 20-30 degrees hotter, and the change was the wrong way to go for that. And so I've decided that was really dumb. Don't go out for the warm-up. Perfect. So I skip warm-ups. I don't do them anymore because there's nothing to be benefited from that. And I had done that for years and years and years and years. And then I skip it one time at Detroit because I always do that. And we get hammered in the race because the track had really changed. And I'm like, oh man, that was dumb. I shouldn't do the warm-up. And I think, now what do I do? Now I'm stuck. What is dumb? What isn't dumb? I can't even define what's dumb and what not dumb. That was dumb then, but not all the other times. Then I think, okay, I'm going to do the warm-up, but I convince myself I'm not. And the next weekend, 2 cars in our class have a massive crash in the warm-up and can't even start the race. So I don't know so then I think, oh, I'm really smart. I don't know. But
okay, so let's pull these two things apart. So if you had to pull down one lesson from Jeff is wrong about weather, unlike literally every other human on the planet, and Jeff is occasionally wrong about warm up, but also not occasionally wrong about warm up. What's the single sentence takeaway from each of these? And also, Ross, if you spot them and neither one of us can, please feel free to step in because sometimes you're too dumb to know dumb, right?
And I'm just going to comment that, Jeff, there's another factor in that decision around the warm-up. Sometimes drivers need, it could be, in a multi-driver thing like an IMSA. It could be, especially in in some weekends, like this past weekend at Watkins Glen, you've got 3 drivers for the race, and they don't get a lot of practice time. So sometimes a driver just, hey, you know what? I just need like 3 or 4 laps just to sort out some things I've been working on overnight.
Yep.
Is that a dumb decision then to go out and give that driver that ability to do that?
Only if it goes wrong, I would say. And maybe that's maybe what
it's
the
only dumb if things go wrong.
If it goes wrong. And so maybe that's what the title of this episode should be, not dumb things we've seen. Wrong choices we've made is maybe and by definition, I define those as dumb.
How much time do you have? Wrong choices I've made with my life.
Well,
all the things that keep me up late at night that aren't, Plus, Jeff.
But Jeff, your job, your role is to make a lot of those kinds of decisions.
Right.
So, hey, odds are you're not going to get every single one of them right. So, I don't know. I'm just kind of going, like my whole way of thinking around the mental game of anything. I go to this whole thing around mindset, and there's that whole thing around a fixed or growth mindset. Well, if it's like, well, I made a decision and it didn't work out, so I'm an idiot. Yeah, that's not. And I know you're not saying you're an idiot.
No, I am.
There are some other people that are saying you're an idiot. But
I am often. Well, I think you're right, Ross, and it's the experience, right? So when I was thinking about this, I thought, well, what seems dumb now didn't seem dumb. Things I do now that seem dumb to me didn't seem dumb 20 years ago because I didn't know they were dumb. I'll give an example. In 2018, Penske came back to sports car racing. And so they had Tim Cindric and all the big muckety mucks at Penske. And we at Core had been doing sports car racing for, I don't know, 10 years. And so Penske came, we were racing directly against Penske. They had a DPI car. We were racing an LMP2 car in the DPI class, head to head with Penske. And we get to the first one of the races early on in the season, and we're doing a strategy. There's a strategy call, and I don't remember the exact details, but could have, I'm like, okay, we're doing this. And Penske did the opposite of what we did. And I looked at that, and I went to my junior engineer, and I went, uh-oh. And he said, what? I said, we're doing the opposite of Penske. That can't be right? It can't. I mean, it's Penske.
One of the winningest names in sports car racing basically just went left and we went right. And
and I'm like, oh man, we blew this. This is I'm missing something. What am I missing? And I'm on the intercom with the guys on the box and who are helping me with the strategy. And I'm like, we got this wrong. Oh, we are so stupid. But we were locked into what we had decided to do. We did it, came out, I don't know, 5 spots ahead of Penske. And I'm like, nope, Penske was dumb. Wow. All right. 2 races later, same thing happened again. 2 races after that, Penske's making a call, and it was different from mine. I went, they got that wrong. They're dumb. And they were. The next year, no obvious dumb mistakes from Penske. They learned. I had just had a 10-year head start on them in sports car racing. I go to an IndyCar race, I'm going to be the idiot. Penske's going to get it right. I think it's that experience thing that just points out that things are dumb or are mistakes, and you don't see it until you've learned it or seen it some way.
I think too, what's really interesting about this is that every time we sit down and the two of you start talking about things gone right and things gone wrong, it reminds me that anybody who's any good at anything doesn't think they know anything. They're never convinced that they have the right answer. They're always convinced that they need to keep asking questions. And I guess the question that brings me back to is that there's a moment if you start doing something complex and you don't know anything about it, and you're just starting out in a career or in a job change or in a path or project you've never tried before, and you get a little down the road, you've learned a little. There's that moment where you go from feeling like you don't know anything to, well, I know just enough to be dangerous. And everybody at that point has to make a choice. And we've all seen people who get to that point and decide, well, I know how things work. I understand it. And the alternative there is to decide that, nope, just because I know 10 or 20 or 30% more than I did, or whatever that number is, at that point, it doesn't necessarily mean that you understand anything. And the people who decide at that point that they almost know less than they did, 3 years ago, 5 minutes before, whatever it was, it's the Dunning-Kruger split, the realizing the depth of what you don't know. But on average, how long into the sport, how much time had you spent in the sport before you realized that the problems that you were coming up against were bigger than you thought? Did that happen the first season? Was that 5 years in? Was that 5 minutes in? What?
I don't know that. For me, I don't know that that's changed really. When I first got doing it, I was like, man, I really don't know what's going on. And last weekend, I was like, man, I really don't know what's going on.
It seems like the right answer, Ross.
So isn't there when we first get started in anything, that we're kind of like, I don't know anything, and then we start to get a little success, and that's when we start to become dangerous. And there's a whole thing around pilots or surgeons. When they first start, they don't make a lot of mistakes. When they get to that point where then they go through this period where they thinking, I got this, and that's when they make a lot of mistakes. And then they make enough mistakes that they go, I don't really know enough. And that's, when you're getting on an airplane, the pilot, you want them to be either new or have gone through that period.
Right.
And now they're at that point where you are, Jeff, and where it's like, oh, okay, I still got a lot more to learn.
Yeah.
Is it
It's, I think it's, you know, you get to that point where it seems like I'm fortunate now. I get to spend my time at the racetrack with other high level pros. So it's hard to see. Don't see a lot of dumb things. I don't see a lot of teams making like very basic mistakes anymore. And because they've learned too and they know what not to do. Ross, I was thinking back to this. You and I, when we've worked together on Daytona 24-hour races, you and I put up, it was a Team 16 thing, I think. We put up a list of like 30 things about Daytona that we gave our drivers. And there were basically 30 things that Ross and I collectively came up with that cost us a good result at Daytona. You know, as simple as don't hang your driver's suit out on your motorhome to dry between stints because some fan will steal it. Well, we learned that only because it happened, right? So we had this list of like 30 things, ranging from that to strategy calls to all sorts of things. Those are the things that we learned that didn't seem dumb at the time, but turned out to be dumb. And I've gone through enough of those now where the the detail of the dumbness seems. I'll give you a good example. This weekend, we're doing a pit stop. The car, I'm on the radio and I'm calling to the crew what's happening during the pit stop. First tire done, second tire done, you know, at the start, fuel's going in. And so the crew can understand without having to look to know how the rhythm of the pit stop's going. And that's a standard normal thing. I didn't call car about to be lowered because when the four tires get done, we drop the car as quickly as possible because the fuel will flow faster if the car's, those 6 inches lower off the air jacks. It'll flow faster because the pressure head from the fuel tank to the car is higher. So you want to get the car on the ground as fast as possible to help the fuel flow faster. What I didn't say was car about to come down. So when the air jack guy pulled the air jack out, the car hit the ground and the fueler who's plugged in wasn't really ready for it. And the fuel nozzle popped back just a second before he could push it back in. And it cost a quarter of a second of not fueling because it unplugged and plugged back in real quick as the car bounced on the ground. If he would have been ready for it, if I would have said, car about to come down, he would have been pushed in and ready for it. And I'm like, oh, that was dumb. Oh, man. And I beat myself up for it for the next 5 laps because, that was a dumb mistake by me.
How long, on average is one of your pit stops?
21, 22 seconds.
So we're talking about small things that add up. I mean, that sounds like almost the nature of everything you've been talking about, right? The fact that the big mistakes don't exist, but the small things, it's like the 10th a corner thing. You do that 10 times, that's a second. You screw up 10 times at a 10th.
Yep.
That's interesting. Ross?
When I'm working with drivers, I'm always thinking about this as like, as a driver, do you want to make mistakes? No, you do not. Because, not to take anything away from that pit stop thing, Jeff, but that quarter of a second, yeah, it was costly. But if a driver does something wrong, makes a mistake, the car could be fired into the fence somewhere, and that could be the end of the car and or whatever, right?
Right.
So,
right.
but and some drivers are just become so so hesitant and so afraid of making those mistakes. And I always go, they're just learning takes. That's what they're called. They're learning takes. And pretty sure that the next pit stop, you were on the radio saying car's about to come down.
I'm not doing that again. I
Yeah.
mean, that is, and those, I think that's how you get to be. That's why it's hard to see dumb mistakes that I think are dumb mistakes at the higher level, or the dumbness becomes. I think a lot of people would have watched that pit stop and not seen any problem with it.
Right.
So, but if you get to that level, it's the same thing. You could stand trackside. A person, a, even a good observer of race cars, could stand at the side of the racetrack and watch a driver go through the corner and think that was pretty good. And you, Ross, would stand there and go, "Oh man, he did this wrong and this wrong and this wrong and this wrong." You'd have 4 things wrong
Ross,
or
do you
dumb.
see it, or Ross, and I guess both of you, do you see a difference in how drivers at the top level react to their mistakes? Because there's a different it's not just how they internally react, how they come back from it, but anybody who's worked in a team, worked in a management environment, worked in an office, I don't know if you've ordered fast food, like at some point, you know that your reaction to your own mistake or to someone else's mistake is just as important as the mistake that was made. And the notion that somebody who's in a car, who is the tip of the spear for 10, 20 people, umpteen thousands of dollars in an effort on the weekend to do whatever the hell it is that they're doing, that if that person, as an athlete, they have to go, that mistake doesn't matter, I have to keep going. But at the same time, if they're flippant about it, and the team sees them being flippant about, I don't know, firing the car into the wall, that's not the right response either, because it impacts how everyone sees what you value and how you value their efforts and how you value everything. Does that, when you get to a certain level, does that change? Or, I mean, is everybody essentially looking at stuff the same way? They can't be, right?
So the first thing that I see in the best drivers is the same thing that we're witnessing here with Jeff is taking
Athlete's foot?
responsibility. Athlete's foot, yes.
Clearly.
No, driver's foot.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
This is like when we renamed potatoes freedom fries. I don't know if I can get on board with the new term, but I'm here for
it. But Jeff is critical of himself, but not in a I'm going to beat myself up way. Like I'm going to spend the rest of the race just focused on that. The best drivers are very like, oh, made a mistake there, and I can't fix it right this moment, so let it go, but I'm going to fix it later. And that later might be the next lap. And they're constantly trying to figure that piece out and going, yeah, that was a mistake, but I just learned something from it, and I'm going to use that going forward here. And that's the thing that drives the best drivers more than anything else, is just constantly looking for that last tiny, that quarter of a second, and even less than that. Yeah.
It reminds me, what you just said, Ross, reminds me of a thing. I don't remember when it was, but it was Al Unser Jr. in an IndyCar race. Don't remember all the details. Driving for Penske, left the pits, left to retire, fell off, and he lost the race. Al Unser Jr. lost the race. And they interviewed him at the end of the race, and they said, "Oh man, you must be really mad." And I guess Roger will probably fire that guy for making that mistake. And Al Jr. said, "I hope he doesn't fire him. I want that guy on my left rear from now on." And they said, "Really? He just cost you the race?" He goes, "That guy will never make that mistake again. He is so dedicated and to perfection. I want that guy on my left rear tire from now on."
That makes so much sense. Oh, okay, so now the next obvious question is, all right, Jeff, one of the few things you and I have in common, outside of being people who like certain things and people who like coffee and people who can't get enough of certain other things, is that we're both parents, right? The difference is your kids are grown. Colin and Travis are they're almost my age, and mine are, my youngest daughter just turned 9 and my oldest is about to turn 11. But looking at Colin, for example, so he's got multiple sports car championships. He's one of the most successful drivers in American sports car racing in history. How did you teach him to be okay with his screw ups? What was and when that came down to it, what did you stop and tell yourself? Because so much of parenting for me is like, okay, I need to think about this and not just turn on the fire hose of words that is my mouth. I need to actually think about the fact that I'm impacting someone else's life when I tell them, yeah, don't smear toothpaste all over the dog. How did that work with Colin?
Wow, I don't really remember a specific thing. We never were afraid of mistakes. That was kind of the thing. It was like just what Ross said previously, don't get paralyzed by being afraid of a mistake. You're going to make a mistake, learn from it, move on. Don't beat yourself up over it. The cool thing about a mistake isn't it can actually be a cool thing. Okay, yeah, I didn't tighten the left rear wheel, but I will never let that happen again. Or I did this in this corner, but I'll never let that happen again. Or, man, I just got too over anxious and tried to pass that guy when that was just, I wasn't thinking clearly. I know now in that circumstance, I'm going to be a little more clear headed. We taught him from that kind of a thing.
Huh.
Recently I just read a quote from Roger Federer, the legendary tennis player, who he said, "Do you know how many matches I won in my career? Of the, I don't know, 1,600 matches he played, was something like, I forget the exact number, but it's something like 80% of them." And he says, "Do you know how many points I won?" And it was 54%. Like
Really?
he only won 54% of the points that he ever played as a professional tennis player.
Wow.
And he says, you have to learn to let go. If you miss a shot, let it go. You miss,
Yep.
like the next point is what's important. And that's what the best drivers do. And this gets me a little riled up because when you ask the question about the dumbest things you've ever seen, where I went immediately is to the Formula One teams who spend hundreds of millions of dollars, and even, decades ago where they're spending, millions of dollars. There are certain teams and people who manage the team and especially the drivers in a way that does not bring out the best performance in those drivers. And I'm looking at, an example that I've used many times is, Alex Zanardi won all those races and championship in IndyCar racing. Like he was just, he was loved by fans. He'd spin donuts at the end of a race. The team loved him. Chip Ganassi, just like, anything you want, Alex, you got it, right? And to a guy like Alex Zanardi, who is a extremely extroverted person who loved being around people and loved to make people happy, that was really, really important to him. So he wins the championship and he goes to Formula One and he drives for Frank Williams and Patrick Head, who are famously, you know, we don't care about drivers. We would rather have a computer in the car. And by the way, a monkey can drive our cars. And that's really what you are. We don't really care about you, Alex. Just that. And people go, Zanardi went to Formula One and he never really cut it, right? And actually got released before the end of the season. And people go, oh, he didn't know how to drive with carbon brakes. He didn't know how to. No, it had nothing to do with that. It had to do with his state of mind, and the state of mind that was driven and caused by a team owner and the engineering director and that team culture was, we don't care about you as a human. And I believe that hurt Zanardi's experience or his performance. He ended up coming back to IndyCar racing, and we all know what happened there. Lost a leg. Would Alex Zanardi's life be very different today had he? This is my theory: is as a extroverted Italian who had just dominated IndyCar racing. If he'd gone to Ferrari, where all the Italian fans would have gone, Alex Zanardi, and they would have, and he would have performed at a level that I believe he would have been a world champion. But it was because of the environment that he was put in. And how much money were being spent on all this technical stuff, and they forgot that there's a human driving the car.
That's, thinking about that, that's actually remarkable, because when you first started,
no, it's not remarkable. It's dumb.
It's dumb.
But that's the point. How it happens, and especially with somebody like him. When you first started unpacking that anecdote, all I thought was, okay, well, think about what's happened with Zach Brown and McLaren and the driver switching lately, and how one guy comes in, then another one's out, then another one's out, then another one's out in IndyCar, right? Just the boom, 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 and what that has to do to confidence when you know that the moment you step on your shoelace, Zach looks at you funny and he's not getting a tattoo for you because you're not Lando, you're just out the door. But thinking about Zanardi, I interviewed him once, and this was, so for those who don't know, remarkable, exactly what Ross said, remarkable firebrand of a driver in IndyCar. The one thing that everybody associates with his name is the Zanardi Pass, where he's Zanardi'd himself. He went down through the corkscrew at Laguna Seca, through the dirt, set it up multiple laps in advance to get around Brian Herta in Champ Car. It's this massive, wonderful thing. Now that you you know that it's coming. You can go and watch the YouTube footage of it, and you can see him timing it, closing the gap. And when he fires the car down through the dirt, shortcuts the corner, and it could never have happened before, won't happen again. But that endeared him to people. And later, he ended up in a terrible accident. I believe it was Lausett's rim, right?
Yep.
And ended up losing his legs, and came back to get into first sedans. And I think he tested an open wheeler at one point. But I interviewed him several years ago, and I forget what he was doing at the time. I want to say he was in a BMW touring car, but I had never met him. And I just remember being absolutely struck by the massive optimism, and you could look in the guy's eyes and see. An old friend of mine used to use this phrase. It's not mine. I can't take credit for it, but you could see the light of heaven back there, right? Like, just the guy was a sparkling, wonderful, just a candle of a human being. And I remember sitting there. I don't know if I've ever been as struck by by exposure to somebody as I was in that conversation. The interview ended, and we kind of moved on to other things. And it literally stuck with me until this day, and will probably be with me till the end of time, until they throw me in the dirt, just because of the dude's attitude, how he came back from everything, the positive burning through his brain, all of it, how optimistic he was, and he had absolutely nothing to be optimistic about, and how he kept wanting to try and move and go and believing in things. And the side of that is, well, if that human can be dismantled by the way, a Formula One team works, it can happen to anybody, right?
Yes.
The fact that matters, this stuff matters, and no one is immune to it. And that's remarkable. You see it in race teams, you see it in parents, you see it in people you work with. The details matter when somebody screws up, and how you talk to them, all of it. I never thought about that. Like that correlation.
Yeah, here's my question. So we're talking about dumb stuff. And we talked about how pro race teams, high-level race teams, make small little mistakes, and they think they're dumb, and they make them better. What I think is dumb in your example, Ross, is these guys, Patrick Head and Frank Williams, they're smart. They've seen a lot of things. They've had a lot of experiences. They've made a lot of mistakes, and they correct those mistakes quickly. What's dumb isn't that I guess what's dumb is that they didn't realize their mistake with Zanardi, because that kind of still happens in Formula One teams. So I think that is dumb, not learning from your mistakes. Putting the left rear tire on loose, letting it fall off, and doing it over and over and over again. That is dumb.
That's dumb. And to your point, Sam, even with all the positivity that Alex Zanardi had, you put him in an environment that kind of squashes that, and eventually it just weighs on him. And I think anybody listening to this podcast will go, yeah, I mean, I was in a workplace or whatever, and you kind of just walk into a room and you go, ugh, this feels terrible here, and that had an impact on Zanardi. And you're right, Jeff. I mean, I look at the way Red Bull has done some things through the years, and they're very, very supportive of certain drivers. But if you don't cut it pretty quickly, it's really negative. And I believe that Sergio Perez's performance over the past few years has been impacted by that. And I believe that Helmut Marko is old school in his thinking.
Satan. Did I say Satan out loud? I'm sorry, I said Satan. Is he Satan? He might be Satan. Well, is Satan Austrian? Who knows?
Yeah. And the power that those guys have, and yet they don't realize, again, that they're dealing with humans, and whether it's Perez or Ricardo or whoever. But that whole Red Bull Junior program they started many years ago, and the number of young drivers that went into it, and then really just kind of got spit up because they couldn't handle the pressure. Well, and then, don't even get me started on Gunter Steiner. I think is the dumbest when it comes to managing people, specifically drivers, and getting the best performance out of them.
I really want to read his book. I saw it pop up on Amazon a while back, and I want to read it mostly because I have a running bet with myself that out of that 300 or whatever page book, 283 pages just have the words "be a dick" on them. But isn't it interesting, right? What
I think that that many pages are going to just every second word is going to be an F word.
Yeah. I read it. I read the book.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
And
it's entertaining.
I mean, that's Gunther, right?
Right.
So,
It's
okay, isn't this interesting though? So we have a business here that arguably more than anything else short of the military or space travel, or I don't know. I was about to say Bell Labs in the 1960s, but Bell Labs worked the exact opposite of this. They just fostered innovation by letting everyone play and be themselves. But the notion that Formula One has hyperanalyzed and, for lack of a better word, scienced every element, every single molecule of what it takes to put a Formula One car onto a racetrack and be as competitive as possible, except the kind of soft, fuzzy science of the people. And anybody who tells you any different, if anybody has a personal experience with how they do that, it's an outlier because the whole sport doesn't do it. And you can see it in how drivers are kicked out. Like it's remarkable. I never thought about the fact that they don't look at that the same way they look at, turning vanes on an end plate or whatever the hell it is. But
And then you take Toto Wolff. I believe that a huge part of Mercedes' success through the years has been because of the way he manages people. Now, is he perfect? I don't know, but he does a great job of bringing out the best qualities and the best in people, whether they're drivers or engineers or mechanics or everybody within the team. And what's made Roger Penske so successful through the years? The exact same thing. Chip Ganassi does that same thing. Rick Hendricks. I mean, like you look at other the flip side of that, the people that are not doing the dumb stuff with people, and they're great people managers.
That's that you can see it in race teams. Ross and I both had a lot of opportunities to work with various race teams. And I go back to I describe that as culture. The teams have a culture. Every team has a culture, like a family has a culture. It's a vibe. It's a I don't know how you define it, but
Jeff, can I?
Yeah.
So one of the ways that I think that you can describe culture, and I think about it like within a business, it's what people say about you behind your back.
Mm.
And
it's mostly that you've got athlete's foot, isn't it? I'm sorry, excuse me, driver's foot.
Yes.
Foot.
Yeah.
No, that's real.
That's the culture.
Wow.
I mean,
yeah.
What do people, when you and I have worked for some of the same teams, and we've had those conversations afterwards going, that's what it's like working in that team.
Right.
Good or bad.
Right. And that culture is a big thing. You described, how things work at Williams versus how things work at Mercedes. It's a different culture, and you can see it right away whether it's good or bad. And so I will say that's, to me, that's like you said, Sam, they spend millions of dollars on testing and tire development and wind tunnels and simulation and da 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 da. That's dumb not to build a proper culture within the team, because that can have a way bigger effect than a wind tunnel test.
And as further proof of this, when Fred Vasseur took over as team principal at Ferrari, did all of a sudden their wind tunnel start working better?
No.
Did their 7-post rig work better? Did their simulation work better? No, their people work better.
Right. Right. I've seen it in NASCAR where there were some, you'd see a driver work with the crew chief in, let's say, the lower levels, the truck level or the Xfinity level. And the guy was obviously on his way going up, the driver was. They develop a thing with the crew chief where they've had good success early on, and then they switch that up. They switch a crew chief with the driver and move them up to the next level. And now you have to spend 2 or 3 years developing that culture again within the team and that respect and all that kind of stuff. Where you could have, to me, just dumb. You could have just kept those guys together and kept on moving them up. And yeah, and that goes back to me. I guess the real dumb thing is that those guys didn't learn from their lesson. It's not the first time it's happened. We started out this whole podcast talking about dumb things, but you don't do that dumb thing again. This, I think, maybe qualifies as dumb. I think it's dumb if you don't learn from the mistake. You can go, oh, that was dumb, and never let the left rear tire fall off again. But they didn't learn. That's dumb.
What's really interesting to me, because we're getting to the nature of how people deal with mistakes and how systems are set up to pull apart mistakes and then reinvent the system to make sure the mistake doesn't happen again, right? And ultimately, what's really really compelling about all of this is that the real mistakes that matter, the real things that you trip over, are never the things that are obvious. They're never the things that you can stick. Uh, you can stick a thermocouple on. You can stick a gauge, a strain gauge on. You can never absolutely measure it. And maybe that's why it's very easy to sit outside Formula One and go, well, they don't care about their people. But the more you learn about that system, and even if you don't know that much, like I know about as much about how a Formula One team works as I know about elephant juggling. But you can look at somebody trying to juggle elephants and go, okay, when the elephant lands on you, you're doing it wrong. The notion that those teams from the outside, you can see in how somebody reacts to the media, how somebody talks to anybody in the paddock. Daniel Ricciardo's body language. You can see when the team has let somebody come apart, and given how much money they have invested in the person, in the effort, how much of a stage it is, everything that's at stake. It doesn't matter whether that person is or isn't up to the challenge. What's amazing to me is how those systems let that stuff carry on for so long. It's like when politicians say something stupid, obnoxious, or step on their foot, or whatever it is. If at a high enough level, you're not amazed that that person said that thing. You're amazed that the system around them let them get to the point where that happened. Because people are fallible, but we can build systems to safeguard the things that we know are going to happen. That's what's remarkable, right? The fact that you can deal with it. And they're just like, we can't measure it. So also, maybe it's just another guy. It's cheaper to throw another guy in there. And it is, but it doesn't mean it's the right answer, right?
So what you guys are saying then basically is it's not the car.
Jesus, why do you guys do this all the time?
Well, I'm sitting here going, hey, Sam, I got this great idea. We should do a podcast that talks about people.
I hate both of you so much. You just keep doing this to me. Every storytelling bone in my body is like, never wear the band's concert. Never wear the band's t-shirt to the concert. Don't wear the t-shirt to the show. Never say the title of the movie in the script. That's fine. It's okay. I'm terrible. I make mistakes all the time.
And I think if there's sort of a big takeaway, it's as you said, Jeff, it's like letting that left rear tire fall off again and again. It's what you do, it's what you learn. And if you do the same thing over and over again, that's dumb.
Yep.
It's the learning.
It's the learning. Okay, so here's a question for both of you guys. As I was trying to think of dumb things to talk about, I thought of some real obvious ones in the general scope of motorsports. I said, wow, it was dumb not to have a roll bar on your car in the 60s. It was really dumb not to wear a Hans device. Man, it was dumb not to have an aero screen on an Indy car on an oval. It was dumb not to have tethers. It was dumb not to have safer barriers. And I thought, no, it's only dumb because we learned about that.
Yeah.
But so was that, and that goes back to that learning thing again. I don't think probably Dan Gurney got in his 60s Ferrari Formula One car and went, well, this is dumb. I don't have a roll bar, but I'm doing it anyway. I mean, we didn't know, right? We learned. And now it seems really dumb. In hindsight, it seems really dumb. And you would never do that again. Nobody would ever jump in a race car now without a Hans device. But 15 years ago, that wasn't the case.
But that's my point, I think, with the way some teams operate is they haven't learned.
That's dumb. That is dumb.
How did Gene Haas, in my opinion, why did Gene Haas allow Gunter Steiner to create that culture and basically beat up on people thinking that was going to lead to good results, a good performance?
That to
me is dumb.
You know what gets me there is that we have this fallacy. So humans, we're a corrective species, right? We can't see the future. The only reason we are here, the only reason the three of us are talking on a magic video camera, the only reason we're making magic internet radio, the only reason my pocket supercomputer lets me live my life and find out where the nearest Jersey Mike's is, all of that stuff is hung on us being able to look at a system and go, okay, this isn't what's working. I think we've hit the wall figuratively with that ability. What if we change it? What if we fix it? And you look at Haas, And you can see it when he's talking to the media. And there's this fallacy that so much, and I don't know if it's rooted in military culture or it's rooted in like, the age-old idea that man's strong because men deal with pain. Keep pushing, push harder, work harder, longer, faster. Work is virtue, right? I don't know if it's rooted in that or if it's something else entirely, but this idea that when you have a problem, the answer is to just boot camp harder and just keep pushing harder instead of stopping and doing the thing that we've always done, which is correct. We are a corrective animal. We don't know what's wrong until we trip on the rock or go over that and say, don't trip on that rock, or go over that hill, find out that there's man-eating tigers over there and come back to the tents and say, no one go over that hill. Our tribe go that way because we're all going to die. Like, it's this notion that just beating your head against the system over and over again is going to improve it, or being some kind of really rigid, unyielding wall is the best answer. And that's what's really bonkers about it, because it's not like this is a new problem. Your point about people, I mean, the whole people thing, like that dates with teams, that dates back to, you see it in Carroll Shelby in the 60s, you see it in Harry Miller in the 20s. Every single person who ever built anything, I mentioned Bell Labs, Shockley, the guy who literally helped invent most of modern society. All of that was built around culture and built around the notion that you can teach cash register. You can't teach nice, right? I mean, it's magic.
And I've said it before, and I know, Sam, you're going to make a T-shirt with this one as well. I'll say it again, so you can get the T-shirt printer out. But we do what we do because we're programmed to do so, and sometimes we don't do what we want or should because we don't have the right programming yet. So when I go, how does a guy like some of these team principals, managers like that, why do they do that? Well, it's because that's the way they were programmed. Probably because that's how they were treated early on through decades. So they go, that's the way you do it. You know, the the sort of that classic way of managing people is put more pressure on them, yell at them, and everything. And there was a time when some people reacted better to that. And I'm going to say that times have changed and we need to understand how to deal with people better.
But yeah, I mean, that's a culture of fear. You know what works really well with a culture of fear? Wartime. And you know what most of human life is not? That we've convinced ourselves, like, well, no, business is a battle. To hell with you. It's not. Like, fear doesn't do anything but make somebody afraid of shit. Like, eat me.
It works
Come
for
on.
a very, 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 very short period of time.
Right.
Yep. It's cool. It's why I like listening to this podcast. I happen to be on it. I happen to be on it, but I just basically fill in my time because I have to, and then listen to you guys because
But Jeff, when you started and you were like, you started saying about the dumbest things you've done, I was immediately going, oh my God, he's going to say this podcast.
Yeah. First off, being friends with a driver coach and a journalist. Second, I guess I'll talk about some tires. Fine.
Yeah.
Weather.
I just assumed that was obvious. I didn't have to bring that up.
Right. Mistakes we've made. Chapter 1000 and Jeff.
Right. But I've learned, I think I've learned something because I was like, dumb. And I think what I'm defining it now as, after listening to this, is maybe those things we talked about early on, maybe I would reclassify those as not dumb. Those are learning opportunities.
They're learning takes.
Learning takes, as you say, Ross. So me not warning the crew, the fueler, that the car was coming down and to be ready to push in harder on the fueler, that wasn't dumb. That was a learning mistake. That was the first time I didn't do that. And the first time it became obvious that I should. Dumbness, a real dumb, would be if I didn't do that on the next pit stop. That would be defined as dumb. It's like your Formula One guy's not treating the drivers right, realizing, that didn't work out too good, Zanardi, and realizing why it was, and then treating the next group of drivers or the next driver the same way. That's dumb. So for me, I'm going to go learning, and I'm going to look back at the things I do, and I'll, from now on, classify them as dumb if I should have known better because I made that mistake before.
There you
I
go.
saw somebody else make that mistake. It's why I love watching IndyCar races, and races with strategy and things like that, because I can maybe learn. I can go, oh, wow, that didn't work out for those guys. I won't do that if I'm ever in that situation, strategy wise or whatever. So that's a learning take, but it wasn't dumb. But it would be dumb if I learned that by watching an IndyCar race, then went to a sports car race the next weekend and did the same thing. That would be dumb. So I've redefined my dumbness. So,
but
makes me feel not so dumb.
Well, I think we've learned how to define dumb now.
Dumbness, right?
But no,
right.
That's it, right? And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier: the fallacy of thinking, that Platonic idea, not Platonic, Socratic idea, the fallacy of thinking that you know what you're doing. And there's a certain amount of that that's necessary. That's confidence that you can't get out of bed unless you're like, wow, am I going to be able to walk to the bathroom at 3 a.m. without falling on my face? But the other half of it is like if you worry about that, you go nowhere. And yet the other half of it is realizing that you know just enough to know when to stop and say, wait, what am I doing wrong here? Because chances are it's either everything or there's something I've missed. And racing's such an interesting case too, because it's not like you don't have, like, everything gets documented, both for you and for everybody else. And you don't always have all of the information or Penske's data when you're not Penske, whatever it is. But there's still, there's logs of it, there's proof. And it ultimately, I'm curious, how many, I've lost count, but which probably says something about the people I work with and have worked with. But there are just as many people that I've worked with over the years that are able to do this as there are blindingly kind of arrogant folks who do the same thing over and over again, regardless of whether it's ending poorly. When you think about the people that you've been around, the people that you've worked with, who go down that road and keep doing the wrong thing, wrong meaning they've got a proven result that is an ideal. And anybody could look at it and go, hey, maybe stop hitting your head against the wall. Is that a lot? Is that a little? How's that stack up?
Very few. Those guys don't last in motorsport, and that's what's cool. I'm sure it's that way in business, and I'm sure it's that way in life. But in motorsport, those guys last they don't last at all, not even a weekend.
That's so cool.
Those guys are gone because it's hurts the performance. They're gone.
And Sam, turn this to you. I mean, have you seen anybody do anything dumb in the magazine business?
Media business in general? Yes. I mean, and the funny thing is, it's all, you mentioned fear earlier, right? So as the talent pool has shrunk, as everybody who's smart looks at it and goes, wow, I don't want to work in a high stress business where my job might go away tomorrow. And it's not any fun sometimes, a lot of the time. And I don't make a lot of money. A lot of smart people look at that and go, no. And as the talent pool has shrunk and everybody's become more afraid of losing their job, of losing that advertiser, of having traffic dip that month, those decisions occur with remarkable frequency. You go back to culture, right? Like I've seen it change the culture of entire offices. I got offered was kind of headhunted for a job once at a place that I had very much wanted to work for a long time. This is nobody I work for or have worked with, but I did an office visit and walked through, and it was like walking into a penitentiary. How glum everybody was, how much they hated what they were doing. This ostensibly great place to work, and they were all miserable. And I came home and I told my wife, and I was like, Adrian, I can't go there. She's like, what are you talking about? They came to you. You really wanted to do this. This sounds amazing. And I said, I walked into that office and I could, it was like my spleen fell out through my shoes. Everything deflated. And she said, do you think that's a thing you could fix? I said, not the job they're hiring me to do. She said, well, what would you do if you, like, how high would you have to be to fix it? I said, the top. I'd have to be hired to run the place and completely revamp the culture. And some of it would mean letting X many people go because they didn't fit. And some of it would be figuring out just who could kind of be recalculated and reframed. But man, it's, it when you see it. And it's in businesses that are struggling or coming apart. It's like it's a virus. It starts self-breeding and it's self-perpetuating. And then it makes the conditions for it to be larger, just keeps growing and growing and growing. It's remarkable.
And Sam, that's not dumb. That's actually smart that you recognize that.
I don't know. I mean, can we go back to making fungal jokes? That sounds a lot more fun. I didn't mean to get all serious for a second, but it's amazing, right? Because it's so obvious when you're on the outside, and when you're in it, you just get buried in it and start thinking, this is how it works.
I would, anybody listening to this, I bet they're all going to go, and there's somebody there. Everybody's going, oh yeah, I had that experience.
Yeah.
That's to make it, I guess, kind of personal on what I'm doing. The competition director job that I've had at a couple teams is really that culture job. It's to instill, I'll give the guys at AWA a huge props. Everybody on that team, all the crew people, from the drivers, owner, everybody bought into that. They had a good culture to start out with, but I was just trying to help that culture to the point where the crew guys are, they look at their pit stop videos now and they want to know how that one step could be saved or this could be done differently. And it's not because somebody's forcing them to, or we're going to dock their pay if they don't shave a tenth of a second off their tire change every time, because they want to do it. And the guy next to him wants to say, hey, if I ran here and took one step wider, you could cut inside of me and get to the tire first, and I'll put it on better. And they're all working together in this culture within the whole team. The drivers are like, oh man, I stopped 6 inches too long, and that made the front guy have to run a little further out and probably cost us 0.3 on the pit stop. I was going to say that was dumb, but they would say, my mistake. I won't do that again, or I'll focus on not stopping 6 inches long in the box to make that guy go out there. And then that whole culture permeates within everybody in the team. And then not only does it become more successful and better, it becomes way more fun.
Isn't that funny too? Because it has to. I've done contract work dipped into places that you know that the culture needs to change, and that there's a fork in the road. And the fork is whether because the knee jerk is, okay, it can't work here. I'm either there are two types of people. There's either I'm going to fix this myself and do what I can here, or I'm going to leave and find something else. And the reality is that it's not two types of people so much as it is two types of situations and systems. You can either look at the system and start trying to change it. And if you see the people in the system and the system moldable and adaptable, and you see it start trying to move, okay, that's a good sign. But the other side of that coin is that not everything works like that. And the moment, I've been guilty of this, the moment you've been in a situation, the moment you realize you're in a situation where like one man can't change the tide of the aircraft carrier, and you've done everything one person can and it's not taking it, that's when you need to leave. And if I'm guilty of wanting to change things so badly sometimes that I stick it out beyond, and being optimistic about it, I stick out beyond where most reasonable people would leave. And some people would hear that and say, man, that's great. You're a very optimistic person. And I hear that and I say, well, no, I'm just dumb. Ha ha.
There we are, back to dumb.
Dumb.
But
dumb.
Yeah. On that note, we are unfortunately out of time. That's our show. If you want to know anything more about fungal conditions vis-a-vis the human foot or the human condition or simply how to be a better person, well, we have no idea. And you're listening to the wrong show. But our topic next week will be how Sam's brain occasionally goes blank and he can't think of anything to say here except how he didn't eat lunch and he's now very hungry for a very large sandwich. But on that note, I will read us out. You guys ready for me to read us out?
Go.
Okay. It's Not the Car is produced by us. The one and only Mike Perlman is our executive producer. He's a lovely man, but he's actually not in the room right now, which means we can say anything about him. And in this case, I'm going to say, Mike, what is wrong with you? Why are you so great? I thought I was going to say dumb, didn't you? What?
I was going to say, you're not going to say dumb, are you, Mike?
No, he's the
Mike's
dumbest. He's so dumb, so dumb. No, Mike is beautiful. We love Mike. I'm the show's creator. For more on bonus content, perks, and future live events, you can subscribe to our free news feed, not newspeed. That would be something else, at patreon.com/not the car. I made Ross Bentley laugh with that one. That makes me happy.
Any like sort of 10-year-old boy joke, I'm going to laugh at it.
That's
fair.
Ross
Right there
Bentley.
with you. Yeah. That option, again, the free newsfeed option is the 3 little dots on the upper right side of the screen. If you like this episode and you'd like to support what we do here, well, that's your own damn fault. And I'm very sorry because you're dumb. No, the answer is please check out the same Patreon link and click become a member. What was that, Jeff?
No, I was just going to say, have fun. Don't be dumb.
Oh, yeah. If you're enjoying the show, man, I am just really bad at reading us out. I'm very dumb. If you're enjoying the show, please share it with someone who might enjoy it. Or, hey, a lot of someone's would be even better. Your recommendations really do make a difference. They really do help us keep It's Not the Car on the air. As always, thank you for listening. And, gentlemen,
another T-shirt. Have fun and don't be dumb. Have fun and don't be dumb.
I'll buy one.